It's interesting that this is the first time I'm reviewing a movie made by the Coen brothers. I mean, these two would have to be the best brother team working behind the camera today. Their movies range from the zany comedy to the completely unclassifiable to the dark, brooding noir. But there are always classic traits that the Coens put into a lot of their movies. An example would be the idea of an unstoppable evil, going after the heroes in a manner that's either humorously over the top or downright sinister. There's also the issue of ethics and the blurred line that constantly comes between good deeds and good intentions. Of all their movies, however, No Country for Old Men was the movie that won them their Oscars for both directing and Best Picture. The movie's based on a book by Cormac McCarthy, who also wrote The Road, which was adapted into a very well-made film 2 years after this film got released. But this one has attracted more attention, a lot of it due to a more widespread distribution. And since a lot of people are probably thinking of this, yes, I'm aware of Confused Matthew's review of this movie. And no, this is not a retaliatory video to said review. Actually, I had no intention of reviewing this movie at all until it was requested by another user. So, all that aside, what did I think of the movie? I liked it. I thought it was a classic Coen brothers movie. It's filled with that same film noir style of their earlier movie, Fargo. Yes, it's very bare bones about the details of the movie, but it makes enough sense for us to follow the film and know what's going on. The characters are played well by people who have to rely on physical acting most of the time in the film, and considering that the details of their origins are mostly left in the dark, they do an impressive job working with less to achieve more. Now, there are flaws to this movie, to be sure, but there are also great moments. Let's just get the story out of the way here first. A man stumbles onto a drug deal gone bad, and takes the money for himself. He's then chased by Mexican criminals, as well as a deadly hitman who is as mysterious as he is determined. There's also his young wife, who's in completely over her head, and the sheriff, an old man who is filled with astonishment at the harshness of his society, as well as the new depths that evil seems to plunge. The man is named Llewellyn Moss, the killer is named Anton Chigurh, and the sheriff is named Ed Tom Bell. These men are the most important players in this movie, and they're played by Josh Brolin, Javier Bardem, and Tommy Lee Jones respectively. The movie follows Llewellyn as he flees with the money, constantly followed by the specter that is Anton Chigurh. Sheriff Ed Tom struggles to keep up with the events, pondering his situation as well as the changing times. Someone once remarked that a good actor can make the phone book interesting, and with that criteria in mind, I'd say the three leads succeed in keeping us interested. Virtually nothing is known of Anton Chigurh's background, but we find out about his behavior, his larger-than-life persona, and we realize that Chigurh genuinely believes that he must be the way he is. In many ways, Javier Bardem does the same kind of thing that Heath Ledger did with the Joker the following year. He left the backstory hidden in legend while being a terrifying reality to those around him. We don't need to know that much about him to know that Anton is extremely dangerous, as we find out throughout the film. I mean, by far the best scene in the movie is when Anton stops by a gas station to buy gas for his car, and then turns the whole situation into an argument on whether he will kill the clerk or not. The scene sets a dark, chilling tone by both of the very talented actors in the scene, and the lack of any music to go along with it. Moss is played by Josh Brolin, with a rugged weariness that Brolin seems to have naturally obtained throughout his career. He looks and feels the part of a man who's experienced a lot in his life, and when we see him resourcefully avoid his hunters, we can almost believe that Josh Brolin brought his props with him to the set. The sheriff is played with somber reflection by Tommy Lee Jones, and this is where the actor reading the phone book analogy comes into play. He has a lot of anecdotes and asides in the movie, which seem to have nothing to do with the movie at first glance. However, there is more than meets the eye if you listen and reflect on the film. But even if you want to argue about the validity of his anecdotes, it's still fascinating to listen to. Jones speaks in such a haunted, worn-out southern drawl that it completely authenticates whatever he's saying. The command of this actor is such that he pulls us through a film that's determined to wear us out. I say this because the movie has moments where it's just painfully crawling along. There's not much music, if any, and the story is minimalist at best. Some characters are so underexplained, it's almost ludicrous, like the bounty hunter played by Woody Harrelson or the man behind the desk played by Stephen Root. And yet the Coen brothers do such a fine job with the atmosphere and the tone that we're pulled along for the ride. And it's a ride filled with some great moments in acting. I've already mentioned the scene in the gas station, but there's also a scene between Woody Harrelson and Javier Bardem which almost justifies Harrelson's being in the movie at all. There's also a very interesting scene where Ed Tom Bell meets up with his cousin to find some answers to his questions, as well as reflect on an earlier family member's demise. The question now is obviously whether I've read the book or not. Well, bits and pieces. I've tried my best to read it, but never really got into it that much. While I have read and appreciated The Road, I'm overall not a big fan of Cormac McCarthy. However, I am a big fan of the Coen brothers, and they took this book and pulled out a movie that, if it doesn't explain everything, at least maintains a dark, nihilistic atmosphere where people must realize that the world is rapidly changing, and those who cannot keep up with it will be lost.